Our next speaker is Natasha Srdoc. She is the co-founder of the International Leaders Summit and also the Adriatic Institute for Public Policy. She has served with the Economist Intelligence Unit, the Economist Group in London for half a decade, and prior to that she was a former corporate banker for Bank Austria and a couple of other banks in Central and Eastern Europe. And without further ado, let me introduce you to Natasha Srdoc.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us for the second annual Jerusalem Leaders Summit. I would like to preface my remarks by quoting Lady Thatcher from her speech delivered in Zagreb in '98. I quote, "Capitalism cannot, in fact, operate without a strong administration to police the laws that provide its framework, and it cannot succeed without honesty. Racketeers, black marketeers, and smugglers are not entrepreneurs. They're just plain criminals. Corruption and gangsterism are scourges which afflict many newly developing economies and states. They should be ruthlessly and fearlessly expunged. Otherwise, not just the free market, but freedom itself is in peril." Unquote. We are seeing our freedoms erode in the US and Europe as a result of domestic policies, crony and corrupt practices in our own respective countries, but also as a result of developments in other countries. As a result, we have a new generation of millennials on both sides of the Atlantic who do not believe in free market capitalism. We need to do something about it. Now, we need principled leadership more than ever, and we here in the room are swimming against the tide. We have to prevail and resist the groupthink. We are facing common issues. Rotating establishments carrying favors to vested interest, blocking the opportunity for all. The good news is that Donald Trump, Najib Farage, and even Narendra Modi upset the established parties in their own respective countries. Secondly, we're facing weakening of the rule of law in the US and Europe, attack on the free media and free speech, and finally, terrorism. The first Jerusalem Leaders Summit took place here in Jerusalem the first week of November last year, exactly 10 days before second Paris attacks, and 30 days before San Bernardino attacks in the US. A few days prior to the second Paris attacks, a car full of machine guns, hand grenades, and explosives was intercepted in Bavaria in Germany. Montenegrin was driving a car and he was arrested. The GPS data indicated that the car was heading to Paris. German police informed Paris police about the incident. However, a series of coordinated terrorist attacks could not be prevented. They happened on November 13, killing 130 people and injuring 368. Montenegro's government released their official response, relaying that we know about the Montenegrin driving the car, but he was not a Muslim. He was a smuggler, part of transnational organized crime. Three factors connected to the Balkan Route played a role in two Paris attacks and a Brussels attack. First, military-grade weapons coming from the Balkans, mostly Croatian, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and smuggled, among others, by Montenegrins. Secondly, some of the terrorists arrived walking through the porous Balkan borders. And thirdly, $28 billion annual proceeds from heroin trafficking coming from Afghanistan via the Balkans are also used for terrorism financing. In the meantime, we have witnessed more than 1.2 million people crossing the borders through the Balkans unhindered, coming into Europe. Only 20% of them were war refugees. Actually, Michal Modrikamen mentioned today 5% were war refugees. The largest group of immigrants were economic migrants, leaving the countries where dictators, tyrants, and authoritarian leaders robbed treasuries and stashed illicit stolen wealth on their private accounts in the Western banks. And here we have a problem. Radical Islamism is aided by transnational organized crime and shady banking and corporate entities in Austria, Liechtenstein, and other Western European countries. Panama Papers revealed the complicity of individuals belonging to various establishments in different countries, their complicity with offshore structures, hiding beneficial ownership of the accounts, and turning a blind eye on money laundering because it is benefiting themselves. Iceland's prime minister was forced to resign. But what about erosion of the rule of law? And even worse, allowing a vehicle for terrorism financing. Radical Islamists are using our weaknesses. Our Western banks, corrupt governments in Eastern Europe, our lax immigration and cronyism, which also allowed the countries of Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, and Croatia to join NATO unprepared, without having rule of law and having unsecured borders. At the moment, Washington D.C. lobbyists and some of the think tank leaders are lobbying for Montenegro to join NATO. Carnegie Endowment's Moises Naim called Montenegro a mafia state. An Italian prosecutor accused Montenegro's former prime minister, who just stepped down, Milo Djukanovic, of having, quote, promoted, run, set up, and participated in mafia-type association. We need to understand that NATO-related decisions in much of Eastern Europe are made by corrupt officials. We do not have reliable NATO partners in most of Eastern Europe. We do not have luxury to be complicit. We have to confront those in Washington, D.C. and European think tanks and colleagues who have been funded by individuals who are connected to the organized crime operating in the Balkan and Eastern Europe. The very group, individual, who has enabled illicit financial outflows by corrupt officials in the Balkans has been a trustee in the Liechtenstein-based company owning a US company, which is getting most of its revenue from Justice Department, Defense Department, and Homeland Security. The same group that eroded the rule of law and brought national security in the Balkan countries to its knees is involved in the national security of the US, Israel, and India. Where is the jurisdiction for the rule of law in this case? The Balkans and Liechtenstein, where money laundering happens, can squash any kind of investigation. And the US and rule of law countries do not have venue or jurisdiction. It is important to expose the truth, for which we need the free speech and media freedom that are being under attack by the same actors. A US survey conducted by YouGov in January last year found that 43% of Americans under 30 had a favorable view of socialism, while only 32% had a favorable view of capitalism. It is not only that they do not know what socialism is, but also they have never experienced capitalism or free enterprise, which is based on the rule of law and which provides equal opportunity for all and favoritism to none. On the other hand, there is nostalgia for socialism in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europeans were told that with the fall of the Berlin Wall, capitalism came. As a matter of fact, most of them have never lived it in their own country. They experienced criminal capitalism. Many times it is the same big corporations, banks, offshore jurisdictions, and known individuals which are perpetrating and abusing lack of transparency, lax laws, chronic tax system, burdensome regulations, corrupt governments, even organized crime for their own benefit. By bailing out the big banks, we crossed the line. We made it possible and acceptable to privatize profits and socialize losses. Our mission is noble, but possible. It's difficult. We need to seriously tackle cronyism around us, protect the rule of law, which should provide equal opportunity to all and favoritism to none, and fight for free speech and freedom of the media to expose these issues for the sake of the next generation. And I would like to conclude my remarks by quoting Ronald Reagan. "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States, where men were free." Thank you.